This morning we are now in Psalms 136. You know how in the Hebrew they repeat something? In Hebrew they would repeat 2 lines, and then be 2 lines repeated and 2 lines repeated. This one is different. They repeat something, but every other line, all the way through the whole song, right? It starts out, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting." Mine says. What does your translation say?
His love endures forever.
Endures forever, right. Okay? I mean, you could preach sermons just on that verse right there. Easily. Right?
Some people could.
Well, I don't think I marked it. If we go to Hebrews 13:15, right? It says, "Through him then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God. That is, the fruit of lips that give thanks to his name." Right? And why should we praise and give thanks to God? Right? What has he done for us? Anything?
Promised us everlasting life.
Everlasting life. Because his loving kindness lasts how long?
Forever.
Forever. How long is forever?
Everlasting is what it says.
Right? Does it mean there's no end, right? There's no end. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Right? His loving kindness never ends. Never ends. He's offered us eternal life with him. And not only did he offer it to us, like I say, he went out and grabbed us by the scruff of the neck and yanked us back into the family. Because if it had been just up to us, we'd have just kept on running. Right?
Thing I've always wondered about, and I know, well, I don't know. But God supposedly spoke the entire universe into existence.
Yep.
What was there before?
Good question, right?
I don't even.
Well, the universe as we know it did not exist.
But where was he? Where was it?
There was no it.
Well,
It has a beginning. About 6,000 years ago, all of a sudden, there it is. And we'll be talking about the fact that we have measured across the expanse of all the universe, right? And it's about 60 billion light years, which is obviously a distance that we can't even fathom.
all of it.
We think we have. We think we have. Everything that's currently seeable that we see, we measure, the mathematicians have saying us that it's 60 billion light years. And the only reason why it's there is to support human life here on Earth.
Well,
Dr. Hugh Ross did the math and pointed out that, and I don't remember the exact argument, but the point was that all of that needs to exist for life to exist on Earth. Right? But did God forgive you for your sins?
he says he did.
I believe
He
him.
will.
I'll take it. He does. Continues to do it because I keep sinning. And he keeps forgiving me because his loving kindness is everlasting. Do people value other things more than God?
think they do. Because some people don't believe that there is a God.
Yep. They choose not to believe in God because they want to be God of their own life. They don't want to be accountable to God, so they choose not to believe in God. Right? The evidence for God, as God himself says, is overwhelming. You're going to have no justification when you stand before God on Judgment Day and try to give a reason why. Well, I couldn't believe because not my fault. You're going to say, no, it's your fault. You chose, and thus you chose to go to hell. Your choice, not mine. My choice is for you to come to heaven, but you chose not to come. And thus, that's where you'll be. I will honor your choice. Right? So, but the things that he's done for us, you know, and who he is, it goes on to say, give thanks to the God of gods. We had that discussion, was it last week, about the little g gods, the man-made gods and all that, you know, right? For his loving kindness is everlasting. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. Anybody remember our studies in Revelations? Does that ring a bell? The Lord of lords? Huh? Revelations 19, right? Verse 16, and on his robe and on his thigh he has the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. When Jesus comes back, right, not as the suffering servant, as he did in his first coming, but as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Is there anybody like God? No. There's only one God.
Elvis thought he was.
You know, there's only one God. I was asking Irvin, because he's the source of all wisdom over here. You know, before God created the heavens and the earth and created man, he had created angels and the cherubim and the seraphim, right? You know, and who knows what. Well, what did he do before he created them?
Play horseshoes.
Played horseshoes.
No horses.
Not much of a challenge if you're God. Yeah, how you gonna play horseshoes when there are no horses? Nor shoes. You know?
Yeah, and no stops.
And since he's an infinite, you know, spiritual being, you know, it's just, but see, that whole subject matter is so beyond our mental capability to understand. You know, even if he had told us, we probably wouldn't get it. And maybe he did tell us, and that's why, and we still don't get it. You know, it might be in here somewhere, and we don't get it, right? I don't know, because we don't get it.
There's a lot of that going around.
We simply don't know what we don't know. The problem is we don't know that we don't know.
Well, I think the other problem is we don't care.
Well, part of the time I think that's, you know, true also, right? So it says he's the Lord of lords. To him alone does great wonders. This great wonders is like miracles that only God can do, like creating the heavens and the earth. Right? Only God can do that. So we have this conversation here about great things that God has done, right? His loving kindness is everlasting to him who made the heavens with skill. I mean, that alone is just, like you were talking about, Jerry, just blows my mind. That God could just speak. And all of this could come into being, you know, I mean, something out of nothing. We know natural science tells us you can't do that, right? God can do it, you know, and it all works perfectly. You know, it just all works together. And he just speaks, and boom, there it is.
Yeah, as far as I know, we haven't had any planetary collisions anywhere.
Mm-mm.
And that's been ticking along for a long time.
To him who spread out the earth above the waters, right? When he created earth, you know, and he pulled the dry land up out of the, and so now we have the land separated from the waters, right? Then he created light. Then he created the stars. Now, according to some scientists, he had to create the stars first or there'd be no light. But no, he created light. Then he created the stars. Light has a lot of really unique characteristics, right?
Do you buy this where God created the earth and then recreated the earth or something?
No, I don't. Now, is it possible, because the Hebrew word can be translated recreated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that he had created the heavens and the earth, and then 6,000 years ago he recreated it with his voice? It's possible, but that becomes a mute argument. Everything we know about the heavens and the earth started 6,000 years ago. Everything. So trying to justify, I mean, people use that because they want to justify millions of years because they want to believe in evolution. But that totally ignores the fact that death comes as a result of sin. But they're wanting to tell you that people and animals were living and dying for millions of years before, right? That's not what God said.
I went to a Bible study one time, and the guy, he talked the way we think now, but then he gave his own opinion of the way it was. And he said,
Yeah, that's just rationalization because you want to blend in with what you believe scientists believe. And there are scientists that believe in evolution, etc., because again, they don't want to believe in God. When the evidence for a 6,000-year Earth is absolutely overwhelming for anybody who really wants to look at it. There's no doubt. There's no question. Right? It cannot be argued successfully. But people choose because they don't want to believe in God, because they don't want to be accountable to God, which we are, whether we want to or not. It's still going to stand before God on Judgment Day, right? And every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. Now, a bunch of people are going to go to heaven, and a bunch of people are going to go to hell right after that. But they're going to confess that Jesus is Lord, because He is. It's that simple. You know, and this is what God tells us, and science tells us, right? If you really look at it, you know. But He's done so much for us, you know, throughout the whole creation. You know, it gives us this evidence, right? Because His goal is for us to come to heaven. That's why He created us. But yet, He created us with free will, and sometimes we choose that we don't want to go. We want to be God, and thus we get to choose where we go. And He'll honor our choice, if that's the choice we want to make. Right? In verse 6, His loving kindness, right, is everlasting. Then in verse 7, to Him who made the great lights. What are the great lights? The sun and the moon. The sun and the moon. I mean, you know, and creation. His loving kindness is everlasting. The sun to rule by day, for His loving kindness is everlasting. The moon and stars to rule by night, for His loving kindness is everlasting. Remember, this was sung by the worshipers, right? Now, we don't have any idea when this was written. It could have been written right after the Exodus, because the next several verses are all about the Exodus, right? It could have been written after the exile to Babylon. We don't know. But when you're singing this, and the chorus is always, his loving kindness endures forever, right? And then we have the switch from the creation to the Exodus, to him who smote the Egyptians in their firstborn. He's referring to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians, the 10th of the 10 plagues. You know, he doesn't list all 10 of them, he just lists the big one, the one that made them collapse, right? The firstborn of all Egyptians, firstborn male of all people and animals, died. You know, my dad was a firstborn male. I was a firstborn male. I have a son, Mark, that was a firstborn male. I mean, all if it hit now, we'd all be gone. You know, it's that kind of a thing, and that's what said. Pharaoh said, not only can you go, you must go, and here, take all our gold with you when you go. Right? Get out of here. Just get out of here. We don't want any more of this. Right? Because he refused to acknowledge God. So God destroyed every one of their gods that are false gods, you know, including their sun god Ra, right? In those 10 plagues, every one of their gods the gods that they believed in, he proved to them that that had nothing, right? And brought Israel out from their midst. Because of God's work, right? He brought Israel out of the Egyptians. And they were doing what there? They were slaves, right? You know, for his loving kindness is everlasting. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, his loving kindness is everlasting. To him who divided the Red Sea asunder. How did they get across the Red Sea? On dry land. So you have this wall of water on each side. And modern evidence says, oh man, I thought we had a map there. I was going to point to the map. I'm going to get this out of here. The Bible Atlas, right? Because I want to show you something, you know, right below there. Each one of these maps gives us, okay, if you look here, you know, the popular opinion is they came from here and they went across up here and then wandered in this peninsula right here and think that Mount Sinai is down here. But in reality, this body of water is where you find all the evidence that they crossed. There's a peninsula on this side where they would have gathered, right? And to this day, there are chariot wheels, etc., at the bottom of this body of water, right? And that puts them over in Saudi Arabia for the wandering before they end up coming back up here and crossing back, right? If they just crossed here, it wouldn't have been necessary to cross here to come up, you know, but they had apparently gone all the way over here and then up and then came back in across the Jordan, apparently, you know. Because they found all kinds of stuff down there at the bottom of here, you know, and this is deep enough that that water at places could have been 100 feet deep, right? So now, if you're standing there on the side And Moses is like, let's go, and you're seeing this water. It takes some faith to step out. But on the other hand, the Egyptians are coming.
Yeah.
The Egyptian army is on its way. So you're like, well, all right, God, let's go. And so they cross, right? Because he had divided, made into two parts, the Red Sea. And the wind blew through and dried it out, because it was probably pretty muddy down there, right? Been underwater for a long time.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
When they went across, it was not wet, muddy at all.
Right. They went across on dry land. Right?
As long as he held those arms up.
No, that's a whole different story. Yeah.
That's what it said in the movie.
Oh,
We don't
okay.
know for sure.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
why I thought I read that.
No.
That was during a battle.
Cecil
Yeah, that was
Rhodes.
the battle. That was during a battle where he held his arms up. And they got tired and they had to help him hold his arms up. Right? Now, in this case, they just marched across on dry land. I don't know how wide the divide was, but if you got roughly 2 million people to move across, right? It probably was a mile wide. I don't know. Right? You know? So they move across and made Israel pass through the midst of it. His loving kindness is everlasting. But he overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea, or shook off Pharaoh. The actual Hebrew means shook off, right? He shook off Pharaoh, for his loving kindness is everlasting, right? Because the Egyptian army just said, well, if they went through, we'll go through. But while they were there, the water came back. And now the Egyptians don't have an army.
I wonder if they had curse words.
I'm sure they all said something about the time that water was coming down, right? And they would have been tossed around big time,
Oh, yeah.
right? You know? And he led his people through the wilderness. How long? 40 years.
4 years.
But their sandals didn't wear out. 40 years. I can't get mine to last 4 months. 40 years. They're wandering through the wilderness. Their clothes and their sandals didn't wear out. Right? For his loving kindness is everlasting. To him who smote great kings. Right? The places they were traveling on the east side of the Jordan. These kings over there. Right? For his loving kindness is he slew mighty kings. You know? Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, for his loving kindness is everlasting. Right? And gave their land as an heritage.
I'm supposed to go to.
Right? So the land that belonged to the Canaanites and others, because now we're on the east side of the Jordan, he gave it to the Israelites. Even a heritage to Israel, his servant, right? As a heritage to Israel, his loving kindness is everlasting. Who remembered us in our low estate. Now we've gone back from the Exodus. You all right, Jerry?
Yeah.
To a different time, a different event. Unless the low estate is when they were in Egypt. Did they have a low estate when they were slaves in Egypt? And this Hebrew word means physical and spiritually. They were bankrupt. Right? So physically as slaves, spiritually, God never did get Egypt out of those people. He had to take the next generation into the promised land. Right? And has rescued us from our adversaries. Plural, adversaries. Not just Egyptians, but these other kings. And depending upon when this was written, how about the Philistines and right? Or even the Babylonians. What has he done for us? Has he rescued you from your adversaries? Who's your biggest adversary?
Satan.
Satan. Did he rescue you from Satan? Right? How about your flesh? Your want to sin. Has he rescued you from your sin? Huh? His loving kindness is everlasting. You know, if we stop and think about all the things that God has done for us, right? Who gives food to all flesh, not just people. I was gonna say I didn't miss any meals, but this week, you know, the last couple of months, some of my meals are vegetable juice. Right? But nonetheless, right? We don't go hungry, do we? Does he feed the birds? I mean, the whole cycle of what we call nature, everybody, even spiders get something to eat, right? His loving kindness is everlasting. Give thanks to the God of heaven. His loving kindness is everlasting. The God of heaven is a phrase that means the God of all. Right? God is the God over everything. Everything. He's the God over Satan. He's the God over Ray. Right? He is God, period. There is none other. And this God, who can speak the heavens into being, decided he wanted to be with you. He wants you in heaven with him for all eternity. It's a good thing that he chooses to change us when we get there, right? I mean, we're in the process of that sanctification where we're getting closer to be like Jesus. But when we get to heaven, the job's done. We won't have that flesh nature causing all kinds of problems anymore. Thank goodness. Right? Or we'd get kicked out of heaven like the devil did.
You know, Moon, he was gonna be the
The Korean guy,
he's gonna be bigger than God, you know. And a lot of people felt, but,
yeah, people get tricked into that stuff.
yeah. And that's,
Yeah. A lot of people claim to be Jesus. A lot of people, you know, and politically we have all these different leaders and kings and whatnot throughout history that think they're really something special, only to find out when they die that Jesus is Lord, and they're nothing. You know, and now they're in hell, just like anybody else who chooses to deny that Jesus is Lord, you know. Well, that's Psalms 136. Any questions or comments or any of that sort of stuff? All right.